Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Happy Monday. Starting a new week. Monday edition of the show. That means we have plenty of news over the weekend to catch up on. I am Trevor Lane. You can find me over on X at Trevor_Lane, joined by Kate Smith at Kate Smith NBA. Before we get into all the news, if you haven't done so yet, follow us here on the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button there. And then, of course, turn on notifications as well. And then do the same over on the podcast side. Do both. Watch us on the video. And then, like, if you're driving or something, subscribe to the podcast side over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. And then you can just listen to us if you're driving in the car or whatever on the podcast side. So make sure you guys do give us a follow. Keith, new week starting up. Are you ready for it?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm going to be ready for it. We are going to be childless for most of this week. We're dropping our daughter off at the airport at 3 a.m. tomorrow. They are headed to Washington, D.C. for a school trip, the entire 8th grade class, which sounds like an absolute nightmare to me, and I'm glad I'm not going on this one. But yeah, so it's going to be all about basketball and just hanging out and probably doing whatever we want. We've already got like all these meals planned, that things she doesn't like. So, and no running around to soccer practices at night or anything like that. So it's going to be weird to wake up and kind of just start the day without a school drop off and no afternoon interruptions or anything. So it's gonna be a little weird, but yeah,
you get a little sneak preview of what the empty nester life will someday. We're not going to get ahead of ourselves, but will someday be like.
It's coming up quicker than I like to think about, because it's we're only about 4.5 years away here before she's going to be off to college. So that's why I'm I'm making sure I don't miss anything other than this Washington DC trip, because that just sounds horrendous to me. So not DC itself. I like Washington DC, but being there with 80 some odd 8th graders, yeah, I'm glad I'm staying home.
I have done plenty of trips with 8th graders in the past. I've done a Washington D.C. trip. Fortunately, I was sent as a department and not with 8th graders, which was great. But having taken 8th graders to places like Disneyland before, you're probably making the right call there, hanging back and enjoying the child-free life for just a bit.
Yeah.
All right, well let's get into it. And I wish we got to jump into like exciting trade news or something, but unfortunately we've got a rough story from the weekend. Kelly Oubre Jr., who was off to a fantastic start to the season, looked like one of the better veteran minimum signings, maybe the best veteran minimum signing of the offseason for the Philadelphia 76ers, hit by a car, was taken to the hospital. He was in stable condition. Turns out he broke a rib. He's pretty banged up you would expect if you're hit by a car. And so he's expected to miss now significant time. Really, really tough for a player who, look, if you're a guy like Kelly Oubre and you sign a veteran minimum contract, the goal is to not have to sign another veteran minimum contract the next year to prove to everybody, hey, you shouldn't be on this deal anymore. He was well on his way to doing that. And now he's going to have to sit out for a while as he recovers and then get back up to speed.
Yeah. And we don't have any sense of how long. All that's come out was he was going to be rechecked in a week, but this is not the way I'm reading all of this. This is not like an injury reevaluation in a week. Like a guy rolls an ankle, we'll look at it in a week. It sounds like this is more of a medical recheck. Like, let's make sure that rib didn't poke anything when it broke. Yeah. Let's really check on all the cuts and bruising that he has, because it sounds like that's fairly extensive too. So I hope they find the person, because the really sad part of this is the person fled the scene too. So they hit him, and it sounds like it could have been worse. It sounds like it was a mirror that actually caught him, but they were traveling at such a high rate of speed that it wiped him out and clearly broke a rib. So thankfully it wasn't a step further into the crosswalk or wherever it was he was crossing the street. So be careful out there. It's crazy, and pay attention when you're driving, and hopefully things that ends up okay with him and all that, because you're absolutely right. He was having a great season. One of the better seasons he has had. And this is a guy who's been a good player. I've always felt like he's gotten a little bit of a bad rap because he's mostly a scorer, in what he does. But he's just one of those guys. He believes every time that he can score on whoever's defending him. And this year he's doing it quite well. So Philly's got fortunately for them, some extra depth from the James Harden trade, especially at that forward position. But yeah, let's hope. But I'm hopeful, maybe Christmas or New Year's, maybe we see Kelly Oubre Jr. back in the lineup. But hope and I don't know, maybe that's way too early. Maybe it's more like February. But let's hope he gets back on the floor this season and picks right up where he left off.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Hopefully, we get a speedy recovery here for him because, man, I mean, it was. I'll tell you what, Keith. When that story first came out and said Kelly Oubre Jr. Was hit by a car. I mean, my heart dropped for a minute, and I went, "Oh no!" Like this could have been much worse. But even so, this is going to be a bit of a recovery for him, and hopefully it does happen quickly, because this is not the type of thing we typically, this isn't like a sprained ankle or something like that he's recovering from.
Thankfully, in the initial tweets and reports, like they were very clear that he was, and I'm using the term okay, like kind of, being quotes there, because it's he was okay, not seriously injured, as far as life threatening injuries or anything go. So that part was good, because you didn't have to get he was hit by a car and then just wait for a further update. So, but yeah, it's just it's super scary to get that. And we I'm in the same boat when that came in, and I saw however it was phrased, something like Philadelphia 76ers forward Kelly Oubre was hit by a car. I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, I'm very, very thankful, like I said before, that he wasn't a step further into the street or the crosswalk or wherever he was.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to make a joke out of it, I guess. Maybe I'm debating whether or not I should even say this, but I'm thankful that they didn't report it the way that Michael Scott reported hitting Meredith with the car.
Right?
Yeah. That was
awful. Yeah, Michael was he was a little out of bounds on that one.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to our next topic, and that is simply the Clippers. Winless now with James Harden. Continue to have problems. Lost to the Memphis Grizzlies, who are at the bottom of the table in the Western Conference. Yeah, I mean, it's not. Things are clunky. Which, Keith, I'm seeing a lot of people that are already just shoveling dirt on the Clippers, and far be it from me to not take an opportunity to shovel dirt on the Clippers, right? But I do think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Like, yes, you would expect them to win a few more games here, but I also didn't expect that integrating James Harden would just be a seamless, easy transition and off you go and everything is just flying at the moment. I figured it was going to take some time for them to figure out how to play together, and maybe they never do. Maybe they never figure out how to play together. Let's face it, Russell Westbrook is not an easy guy to figure out how to play with, right? He's not a guy that you just slot into any system and he adapts to whatever's around him. That's not him. He is the system. James Harden said, I am the system, right? He's also not a guy that you just slot into any system. So putting the two of them together, it very well could be difficult. But I do think that the rumors of their demise are a bit premature here, even if it has been very disappointing for Clippers fans so far.
Yeah, I think it's, for me, what's more worrisome is it's just the way they look. Like Harden, he looks out of shape right now, which I guess he basically missed training camp, and we're just kind of ramping him up here. And maybe if he'd started with them right away to start the year, we would have seen him kind of rounding into form here a little bit. But it's messy. He looked good in the first quarter yesterday. I watched that game, and then after the first quarter, he completely kind of no-showed and disappeared and didn't look very good. He's putting in, even for him, very little effort on defense so far. And that's been a team that
I love that you have to throw in even for him.
Yeah, right. And that's been kind of their calling card, even as this team has gone through a lot of different stuff with injuries and various iterations around Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. They've always been a pretty solid defensive team. So, Ty Lue dropped Bones Highland from the rotation because he didn't want to be too small on the second unit. So that leaves kind of Highland out right now, not playing, which is tough because he was playing pretty well. He's averaging about 12 points per game for the Clippers in games off the bench, and then he started a couple games while Harden was getting integrated into the team. So just a weird spot for them right now. And I think the challenge for them is going to be, the West doesn't look quite like the juggernaut we thought it was going to be. Instead, it looks like we might have a whole lot of teams that are just kind of okay in the middle, whether that's injuries or just they're not as good as we thought they were going to be. But you still don't want to be losing ground and playing from behind for too long. And they're 3-6 right now. They've lost 5 in a row. So that's, certainly not a place you want to be in if you're the Clippers, as they go forward. And the other problem is there's not a lot of easy fixes out of this with this roster because they're kind of out of really tradable salary that
Mhm.
doesn't belong to a player that's kind of a key rotation guy on the team. So that becomes another tricky point to make. So we could have some hard decisions being made down the line here by this team.
Yeah, I do think it's going to be interesting to see, what the Clippers ultimately do rotation wise. Do you split up Westbrook? Do you split up and Harden? How do you make this work? But again, I do think that at some point they're just kind of gonna they're gonna figure it out. They're gonna
Sure.
figure it out at some point. And if that means some difficult conversations have to be had, then so be it. As far as the West goes, it's kind of what I expected. They're all kind of beating the hell out of each other right now. It isn't always pretty,
Yeah.
but you have a lot of teams that are all about the same, and so that's when it's hard to differentiate between some of them. But it's I think it's too. I think bottom line, it's too early to completely write off the Clippers. But yeah, Ty Lue he's got a situation on his hands to sort through, and I think he ultimately will. But it's going to take a little bit of time.
And two things that kind of keep an eye on. This was first was mentioned by the Hoop Collective.
Hmm.
These two things are related, but they were talking about that if Ty Lue moves on from Russell Westbrook, it wasn't going to be moving him to the bench. It sounds like it was going to be like you just are out, like you don't play,
Oh,
and then either you're traded or waived or whatever, because he just didn't feel comfortable putting him on the bench. And so we'll see, and there's always the chance that changes as the season goes along. The second thing was, I don't know how they're going to craft lineups, especially if they want to go with this starting group where it's Westbrook, Harden, and Zubac on the floor together because it just
yeah,
doesn't work. It's 3 guys that teams just they don't really Westbrook and Zubac, they just don't really care to defend all that much. And with Harden, teams are showing him a little bit of a different level of worry with him with the ball. And what's tough is I don't think James Harden is a guy who can ISO 50, 60 times a game anymore and
yeah,
create something for himself or others. I think he's still very effective in pick and roll, but they don't have Joel Embiid, right? Like that's where he was so good last year was either he came off, he found Embiid, or came off, the defense adjusted, and he picked out a shooter or a cutter and, set it up that way. I don't think, finding the switches. I mean, Memphis last night was content, I guess yesterday afternoon it was, said Santi Aldama, pick him up on switches. And Santi Aldama was like, I got this. And had no worry, no problem defending Harden one-on-one. And like that's
oof,
just not, where we expect James Harden to be. So
no.
it's he's got to get himself really going. And then they've got a lot of lineup stuff to figure out. So those are just a couple things to keep an eye on that are related to the team post Harden trade.
All right, the Lakers. A little bit of injury news. Jared Vanderbilt has been cleared to begin his progression towards a return. He was dealing with left heel bursitis. Good news there. We haven't seen him since the Lakers' first preseason game. So Jared Vanderbilt is on his way back. They also made a big shift, putting Cam Reddish into the starting lineup and shifting Austin Reeves to the bench. Darvin Ham has been careful to note that this is not a demotion for Austin Reeves. And I think a lot of it has to do with the absence of Gabe Vincent. The Lakers were put in this weird spot where they essentially, when they started D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves together, not only were they having some issues on the boards and also defensively, but they were also having a problem of one of those guys has to be the backup point guard with the second unit because Gabe Vincent isn't there. And so it created kind of a funky rotation. So by sort of splitting the two guys up, it's only been 2 games, but it seems like both players has benefited from kind of being the guy for the stretch that they're on the floor. They do still overlap a bit, but there's a lot more of separation between the two of them where each one gets their own segment of the game to kind of run the show.
I think that's the key to it because, and I know LeBron didn't play last night, but
Yeah.
when you're in a spot when no matter who you are, if LeBron and AD are there, you're the third and fourth guy. Like it just doesn't really matter what your name is and what your status is in the league, unless somehow it was Giannis or somebody like that.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna slot in the 3-4 pecking order slots, and then I'm gonna say it this way, but knowing it's not like they were out there like a 5-year-old basketball game where two kids are fighting over the ball that are teammates. Like they're fighting for touches and reps, right? Because there's only so many that are going to go around for non-LeBron and AD usage plays. So by splitting them up, yeah, you do effectively now. You kind of cover the 48 minutes of point guard play, plus you allow for whatever time they overlap too is probably going to come with one of LeBron or AD off the floor, too, for as long as this lasts. And I think if you're Austin Reeves, I mean, I had a little bit of fun with the, it's not a demotion, it's a realignment thing, because that was actually like very eerily similar phrase that was said to me in my former career once. And it was like, wait, so I'm not in charge anymore? And then I eventually was like, hey, you didn't take any money away from me and you took responsibility away. All right, okay, it is what it is.
Right.
But it was funny. But yeah, I do think as long as Austin Reeves is still playing 30 minutes a night, it doesn't really matter if he starts, and he's gonna finish more games than he's not gonna finish for the Lakers as well. On the Jared Vanderbilt front, they need him back because they need him on the boards. Like they're just a bad rebounding team. Like, and I don't. This is where it's kind of showing up that LeBron is, you kind of have to play him at the 4 now.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not going to get you 10 rebounds a night anymore in his career. Like that's just not who he is. And then the guards are not great rebounders. Like they're okay rebounders for guards. So you just needed to get Vanderbilt back in there, because he's a guy who he'll go out there and either his activity will create them or he'll be blocking guys out, and he just knows what he's doing on that end, on the defensive glass, especially. So I think this is all stuff that's fixable, but it's just, weird kind of roster constructions. And then do you have enough shooting? It's just kind of the position you're in with LeBron at this point in his career, where it's hard to find those exact perfect fits around him, where it used to be he was the most plug and play player in the world because he could defend anybody 2 through 4. Now he doesn't really do that quite as much. So you're a little bit more limited in your roster or lineup constructions, I guess is a better way.
So Keith, it's a lot of it has been blown box outs by a number of Lakers players, including LeBron. To be honest, he's been great, but he's also he's not closed out on shooters more often than not. He's not boxed out. He's done, but again, he does a lot of other things
in the NBA or whatever.
Exactly.
You're not probably
exactly. I'm not going to expect to do all that stuff. But I will say, final thing on the whole Darvin Ham and the Austin Reeves D'Lo thing. I actually thought, and look, we've been plenty critical of Darvin Ham, but I thought it was very smart the way he approached it. He said, look, Austin, you're going to come off the bench now, but I'm committing to you closing games. So that's kind of the give and take is D'Angelo Russell gets to start, but Austin, you get to be our closer to finish out games. I'm sure there'll be opportunities where D'Lo will be on the floor as well to close. But I thought that was a smart compromise for him. So he's not taking a very, very important player for the team and completely alienating him by just saying, hey, you're on the bench now. Saying, no, we still need you. We this is just something as a team we need to do. And even though you're not going to start, I'm going to make sure that you're on the lineup to close games for us.
And maybe what we're going to discover with Austin Reeves is maybe this is his best role, is a 30-minute a night guy who comes off the bench but closes games. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. If that is his best role in the NBA, he'll have a good, long, productive career in that kind of role. And then maybe it turns into, all right, if we move on from D'Angelo Russell and we rebalance the roster in another way, maybe then he starts and it fits a little bit better. But yeah, it wasn't working great with the two of them next to each other in the starting group. And this just does balance things. I think this is where the whole "it's not a demotion, it's a realignment" quote does make sense, because too many people think that a player being benched is a demotion. It means like they're no good. Now, when I hear benched now, how I think of being benched means is
not playing.
You're not playing. Like you're at the end of the bench and you're not going to play. And we see that happen with every single team does that at some point in the course of the season. I just think this is you're coming off the bench. And again, still going to play 30 minutes a night. So, it in a lot of ways too, it's probably better for him too, because he is at a higher level than a lot of other backup guards that are going to be covering him. So he should be able to be pretty good. And there's a lot of reasons. A lot of guys come off the bench, and often they're good. Like I think of it's weird because it's kind of the what was he Mach 1 Austin Reeves was Alex Caruso in a lot of ways, even though they're very, very different players. But
Yes.
Alex Caruso, the Bulls have basically been saying, yeah, we bring him off the bench because of the way he plays. If we started him and really counted on him to play 35 minutes a night as a starter, he's not going to hold up. He's going to get hurt throughout the course of the year. So it was an interesting story, and I know some people poked fun at it and had their fun with it, but I think at the end of the day, it's perfectly fine, and it's not something anyone should get too worked up over.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree 100%. And both, Austin has seemed to have been kind of unleashed since he's been coming off the bench. So maybe this is the path forward. All right, enough LA talk. Teams are scouting the Bulls right now, but not because, Keith, they're preparing to play against the Bulls, not because they're preparing to deal with the uber effective schemes that the Bulls are going to throw at them or figure out how to defend Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan and all that kind of stuff. Well, I'm sure they are looking for those things too, but teams are scouting the Bulls because they expect the Bulls to potentially be a fire sale team around the trade deadline. And I know Bulls fans are probably fist pumping right now saying, sell,
right?
They just want them to pick a direction here. But the Chicago Bulls, potentially a team to move on from some pieces and certainly somebody to keep an eye on. Although, as the Toronto Raptors have shown us for so many years, that even being in a position where you think they should sell, that doesn't mean they're going to.
Yeah, I think for the Bulls, I'm 100% there that it's time, but I'm also like I have nothing invested in. I don't want to see this Bulls team as presently constructed be a play-in tournament team. Like it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like I just don't like okay, cool. Like that's not like that's bad for them. Whereas like a team like Oklahoma City last year, you're on your way up. So if you're a play-in tournament team, that's great. If you're the Orlando Magic this season and you're a play-in tournament team, who knows, maybe beyond. But even if you're just in the play-in tournament, that's a good thing, right? That's you're on your way up. You reach that status. With the Bulls, like that's not where you want to be. So for me, I don't have anything invested in beyond like I want them to pick a direction that I think makes sense. Now I'll fully say personal opinion is I'd rather be at where they're at for their players at this stage of their careers. I'd rather be trading them off and bottoming out and resetting. But I get it. That's not where Bulls ownership has ever really been. The one year that they did kind of bottom out and they came away with Derrick Rose, that was almost a happenstance thing versus a we tried to do this kind of thing. So I'm not fully sold. I mean, they're 4-6 right now. They're sitting obviously just outside the play-in tournament because everybody is. Nobody's so far away at this point in the young season. But it is like if they're like in that position and they're a game or two out of the play-in tournament when we get into late January, early February ahead of the trade deadline, I'm not going to expect that they do anything. I think that they'll probably just keep rolling forward. And for me, that would not, I'd be like, that's not enough. We'll punt, we'll drop down, we'll, do what we got to do draft wise and try to start to figure this stuff out because they still owe a draft pick out. I think it's the San Antonio from the DeRozan trade. So it's just messy. So I just, and they've got guys that I think teams would give up decent packages for, whether it be DeRozan or Vucevic or LaVine. LaVine's a little tougher because he's owed a lot of money, but he's probably the best player for terms of production plus longevity of that group. And then they've got a bunch of role players. And I said it this morning because I watched Bulls Pistons this morning. And get Patrick Williams off this team. Like it's never going to happen there. I think he might be a good player, but it's just not going to happen with the Bulls. So let's get him onto another team that's going to give him a little bit more of a shot to find out what he could actually be.
Yeah, they're trying too hard to make fetch happen.
Yeah.
And it's just not going to. It's just not going to.
Did you see they're remaking that kind of?
They are?
Yeah, they're making a new version, which is weird. It still has Tina Fey is still in it as like a teacher. And it looks like they're running a lot of the same beats, but just with all like new young people. Versus what it was before, which they weren't really all that young. The first time. most of them. Some
That
of
was
them were
interesting.
like in their 30s. That's always kind of thrown me off. I remember the first one that got me with that was uh she was like the nerd in Beverly Hills 90210. Andrea, thanks
Oh
to
yeah,
my wife,
yeah, yeah. She was like 35 or
Gabrielle
something.
Carteris, I think,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Isn't that her name? She was like
yeah,
35 playing
yeah.
like an 18-year-old, and I was like, wait, what? I was
Right.
like, how is this a thing? And then I remember I think it was my sister was like, that's how it always is. Like
That's
those
how it
people
always
are
is.
always way older than they're supposed to be in those movies and TV
Yep.
shows. And I was like, mind completely blown. Yeah. I
That's
was not a
hilarious.
big 90210 fan for what it was worth.
No, me either.
I wasn't big on it. I remember getting excited because it looked like there was going to be basketball in the show, and then it was always like a 5-second subplot, and I was like, oh well, this is dumb. I'm
And
out.
they never showed like real
Yeah,
basketball because of course they couldn't, and yes,
because none of them
it's not
could
good.
probably play.
No, no. All right. Some more injury news. We've got Tyler Hero is out for 2 weeks with an ankle injury. The Heat are going to have to kind of get by without him for a little
Yep.
bit here. Now, Kyle Lowry's he's had his ups and downs in the season, had some effective moments, but of course you've got Jimmy to lean upon. But Duncan Robinson looks to be resurgent, and so that will help to buoy them without Hero. Not that they play the same role, but an improved Duncan Robinson this season does in some ways help mitigate the loss of, I mean, not just Hero, but also Max Strus, Gabe
Mhm.
Vincent, keeps them afloat here.
Yeah, Robinson he's just such a different player, right? He's really a shooter. But what
Mhm.
looks good is it looks like him and Bam Adebayo have rediscovered that like DHO magic that they had a few years ago when they really the bubble season and then the year after, where those two worked so well together. So we'll see. They're fortunate you can run a lot of stuff through Bam Adebayo, which is something that they've done in the last couple of games here without
Mhm.
Tyler Hero. Butler missed one of those games. Lowry missed the other one in their last two games. So Bam, they're kind of it's like, hey, we're gonna use you like the Nuggets use Jokic and the Rockets use Şengün and the Kings use Sabonis. We're gonna run a ton of stuff through you because we believe in it and he's delivering and he can do it. We've seen him do it in the past. He's a guy who should probably average 6-7 assists per game
Mhm.
if he had the usage up high enough there. But they've won 5 in a row. They get off to a 1-4 start. They were kind of sloppy, looked a little sluggish. They've now won 5 in a row. They moved up in the East, which because that's what happens this early in the season when you win a bunch of games. My big thing is if this thing becomes a thing for Hero and this doesn't clear up to steal your thunder here, this is reevaluated in 2 weeks, so this could be a little longer. But if it becomes a much longer thing, there's only so much scheming and gimmicky stuff you can do. Eventually, talent wins out because teams will see it. They'll start scheming for it themselves, and they'll be a little bit more ready. So this Miami team just doesn't have a ton of depth, and we're not at the point in the year yet where they've cranked out 4 random G League guys and turned them into productive rotation players. Where it's like, where did this come from? So that tends to be a little later in the year. So just something to keep an eye on for now. But 5 in a row, stay more than afloat.
Keith, what's your catchphrase? Like I think I talk about, the reevaluation does not equal return. That's something I say all the time. No trade is better than a bad trade is something I say a lot around the trade deadline. What's something what's one of your go-tos?
If it's not a like a crutch phrase where I just throw it in there, I would say it's probably it'll be interesting or it's something to keep an eye on. Like I don't know why I put those in there all the time to end points or to
Your
make points.
transitions.
It's something I do. Those stick with me. So yeah, that's probably it. Or I always like to when we get into trade season is what matters is that the salary matches. Like I'll hammer that point home
Right,
a
right.
lot on trades. So that's probably it. But people can put in the comments because I'm sure they have other things
Yeah,
that
what are we
say.
not because I'm sure there's stuff we say all the time without
Yeah.
realizing it.
Mhm.
So listeners, watchers, let us know what is it that we say off. What are our catchphrases, our go-tos? Let us know in the comment section.
My biggest crutch phrase that I can't get rid of is and I tend to
Yep.
talk so fast that I say it fast enough that it sounds like yo. And I did a Nick show, and people were like, "You have like the most weird Boston kind of accent, but saying yo like a New Yorker would punctuate sentences with. That's very weird. I was like, I'm actually not saying yo, I'm saying It's just coming out so fast that it's yo.
I'm just imagining. So now the Knicks they've got a
Yep,
they've really got a real cap situation. Yo,
you
they've
got
got.
it. Yep, that's pretty much how it comes out.
They're thinking you're saying yo. I like
Yep.
it. All right, let's get into the Blazers. My goodness, so injured. Injured. Scoot Henderson, Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, who by the way did have season-ending surgery. There's others too. There's other Blazers. Anthony Simons. There's tons of injuries for the Blazers. It was enough to where when the Blazers were playing the Lakers last night, there were a number of times I was doing the live play-by-play of the game. There were a number of times where I'm looking and I'm going, I don't know who that is. Who is that? That's out there.
Jeremy Bouye
the Blazers
played quite a bit in that game. Just called right up from the G League and thrown right into action as Skylar May's backup at the point guard spot. It's funny. Remember when we were like, how are the Blazers going to find minutes for all these guards? And I was like, well, this is how. None of them
there
are
you go.
Yeah, so with this, you mentioned Rob Williams chose the season-ending route with the knee surgery. That's the right route. There's no reason to come back. Get this fixed. Like, try to get this fixed. To be clear, once again, just to emphasize, this was the opposite knee from the one he hurt a couple years ago when the Celtics were making their run to the NBA Finals. This is in the opposite knee. And my guess is completely, not knowing for sure, it's probably related from, just wear and tear and putting more on that other leg. Anybody who was watching the Celtics, we started to realize he didn't really want to land on the previously injured leg the same way he had before. So once you start doing that, you're going to put stress on. And my guess is that's where this came from.
Yeah.
But get it fixed, have the season-ending surgery. There's no reason to return. This Portland team is going nowhere right now. Scoot Henderson's out 2 to 3 more weeks. Additionally, on some bone bruising, on that same ankle that he sprained. So that's a bummer. And I said this on Twitter. I said, this is just starting to feel like a lost season. And I had some Blazers fans who are like, yeah, no kidding. It was supposed to be that way. And it's like, no, you're misreading what I'm saying. Like, you're going to be bad anyway. You might as well be bad with guys on the floor. So you're figuring out what you have.
Yes.
And that, how do Scoot, Simons, and Sharp fit? Can they all three play together? Is there a better grouping of two that works better than another grouping of two of those guys? Where are we going with that? And then you also run into, without Williams. I mean, I know I was completely against the idea of goofing around with Williams and Ayton together. But like, can it work? Why not try it in a season where you're going to lose these games anyway?
No, we don't.
It really doesn't matter the result. So that's what I mean when I say a lost season. I mean you're missing opportunities for evaluation. Like, that's really what this is about. And when you lose that and you're losing games, that's how it becomes a lost season versus just a bad season win-loss record-wise. To clean up transactions, just to be clear, Skylar Mays, who was on a two-way, they had an open roster spot. He was elevated, converted into a standard contract, really out of necessity. They needed him on the guard line just with all these guys out. And then James Bouye, who had been with the Miami Heat and had played in the G League, he was brought in on a two-way contract and immediately thrown in. I want to say, I think he played like 15 minutes last night. He played 12 minutes as Mays' backup. So that's kind of your point guard position going forward there. And they had another two-way guy in the mix last night. Duop Reith, who's a big out of Australia. I know the little bit that I watched and before I went to bed, people were like, well, who is this big guy that's shooting all these threes for Portland? And
that's what we were saying.
Who
is this guy?
That's what he does. And then, Tumani Kamara can play. Like, he's actually done some stuff for them. He was the second rounder they got in the Lillard trade along with Ayton. So, but just disappointing for Portland that it's turned into such a mess.
Yeah. And certainly a team to keep an eye on with Jeremy Grant, who looks probably a little too good to be out there with this team right now, the team that's going nowhere. Somebody's going to come calling for him at some point. Just the question is, how much does his contract hinder a trade negotiation? But wouldn't shock me if he was a guy that's on the move before that February 8th deadline.
Yeah, I think what you could see with Jeremy Grant is, does this turn into one where it is oh, hey, that's good news.
De'Aaron Fox back either tonight or on Wednesday.
Yeah.
He's been out
Wednesday
5
versus
games.
the Lakers.
We knew it. We knew it. As soon as they started talking about his injury status, I went, he's coming back on Wednesday.
Yep. So, I mean, but that's good news for the Kings and good
Yep,
news to get
absolutely.
back in the lineup. Yeah, with Jeremy Grant, what I was going to say on him is I wonder if this becomes like hey, we'll take some bad money back to juice up the draft pick return, because I don't think Jeremy Grant's going to return. He might get you a first, from a team that needs, a forward that can come in and play right away. But I think it is, let's get into a spot where we'll take back some questionable money from you if you'll give us 2 firsts. And then that's how you juice up your draft pick return.
Yeah. Yep. That's it. That's it. And we'll see if the Blazers are able to get something like that done. They're certainly, in addition to the Bulls, they're another team to keep an eye on. We'll maybe do around like the 15 game mark or something like that. We'll do, which is, coming up in like a week. We'll do teams to watch,
Sure.
in terms of or players to watch at the trade deadline. Just guys to keep an eye on early, and we'll take a look at that.
Yeah,
all right,
and just to
ahead.
sneak preview, I will have a piece that comes out about a month from now, right ahead of early trade season opening up. Just kind of guys to keep an eye on for trades. But yeah, well, we can do that here too, because that'll be good. Because I'll make some notes and put them in the piece later.
It's like a preview for the preview.
It is.
There you go. Zion Williamson trying to buy in with the Pelicans. They have been struggling, haven't been winning as many games as they would hope. I believe they're 4-6 right now in terms of
5 in a row.
Yeah, it's
right?
not been great for New Orleans. I'm pulling them up right now, but Zion trying to buy. They're trying to stay positive and trying to make sure that they get everything in order here. Long way to go, obviously, in the season, and plenty of time to turn things around. But Zion is a guy that you definitely need bought in if this team is going to go where they want to go. You also need him healthy. What do you think about him already saying, hey, he's just trying to stay bought in and stay focused?
Yeah, I mean, that's not great.
No.
Right? Like, it's November 13th as we record this. So let's hope that we don't need to be having these conversations. And he said, like, there's a conversation at the end of last season or something before, about what he's going to do. And if you look at some of the stuff on paper, you start to be like, oh, geez, they've got 3 guys averaging 20 points per game, and you've got Herb Jones, who's an all-world defender, and Jonas Valanciunas is pretty solid, and Jordan Hawkins has looked good when he has played. But I think your challenge is it's injuries. First and foremost, right? A bunch of these guys have already missed time. Only Valanciunas, Daniels, Hawkins, and Larry Nance, and two-way player Matt Ryan have played in all 10 games for this team. So that's not great, right? Like that's not a good place to be in. So I think, but hearing Zion say like, yeah, I need to get bought in, like his numbers kind of across the board are just not good, and they're not good enough.
For him.
The thing that's like really worrisome to me is his finishing around the rim has been poor. He's only at 51% overall from the field. He came into this season as a 60% shooter from the field to when he started his career. So that's worrisome when we get into that kind of spot. He is at, let me see, his field goal attempts at the rim are only 47% of his shots, where those have been at in his first 3 seasons, granted 24 games, 61 games, 29 games, and an entire missed year in there. But he was at 74%, 69%, and 62%. 47% for Zion with what he does. And where it's transitioned to, he's not taking more threes, he's not taking more long twos. They're all coming from floater range in the paint. He's up at 48% in there, where he used to be at 18, 25, and 30. So that's very worrisome. And then his finishing at the rim, it's down in the range of, it's at about 72%, which is really not too bad, but it's at finishing in that floater range. He's at 36%, which is really not good. So
it's not like him.
Yeah, get to the rim. And my worry is, can he not? Like, is that the problem, right? Does he not have the explosiveness to get there? And if that's where it is, you can feel however you feel about the Pelicans, but that sucks, because we then collectively as basketball fans were robbed of a guy who should have been one of the most fun players for a decade. And
Yeah.
if he can't be that guy, then it's what it is. It's scary. Do you know who my favorite pre-draft comp was for Zion? Because we weren't
Charles
doing this show
Charles
regularly, but
Barkley, Larry Johnson.
Larry Johnson
All
was
right.
my. And
How about
what's
that? Only took me
scary
2 guesses.
is are we going down the Larry Johnson career path? Right?
Mm,
Larry Johnson was super explosive, was amazing going to the basket, and then lost it. And just he was still a good player for a number of years, but he was never that guy
yeah.
again after knee injury. So that's my worry is, I just I hope I'm wrong. I hope he needs a handful more games to get himself in shape and fully feel confident. But if he doesn't have that blow by ability and that ability to just explode, up and over players at the, to finish at the basket, I don't know, man. That sucks.
Yeah. Absolutely. It definitely does, and not where we want this to go with Zion Williamson. Like you said, and think about this. It's Zion Williamson, Ben Simmons. Now John Morant is dealing with all his stuff. Like so many of these good, exciting young players
Mm-hmm.
that it just kind of feels like we haven't gotten to see become what we hoped they would become. And look, Jaw's back in 15 games. Maybe he picks it up and gets going there. Ben Simmons has been a bit better this season, but still, it just we had so much hope for all of these guys at one point. And I'm sure, and there's other guys I'm sure I'm leaving out here, and they just haven't quite lived up to the billing yet. And I hope they do. I hope they do because the NBA needs stars like them.
No, 100%. Yeah, it really does get to a point. So as I'm just because I wanted to pull it up there while we're talking. So yeah, Larry Johnson, he played his first 2 years. He played 82 games each of his first 2 seasons. Next season, played 51 games, and then he was just never really the same as what he was as a finisher at the rim. He became a guy who took for the time a lot of jump shots, a lot of 3-pointers. You just never really fully developed back into that guy. There he still played another number of seasons after missing all that time in the 93-94 year, but just wasn't the same player that really we all wanted him to be. He's kind of, I think everybody then remembered him as the guy who would take jumpers on the Knicks, right? Because that's really what he turned into was that late player. And I realized some of our audience is like, I don't even know who you're talking about. Right?
Grandmama.
What? Yeah, that guy. Like he was once a super athlete, like, but he was like that's what he was. So this was the year before he got hurt, 92-93. He was an all-star, averaged 40.5 minutes per game, played all 82 games, 53% shooter from the field, took under 1 3-pointer per game. 22 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists. Like that's where Zion was at. Like that's what he was. So that's why I just, I didn't want him to live up to the pre-draft comp of Larry Johnson for this. I wanted him to be what Larry Johnson should have been. And now I'm afraid maybe we are going to be Larry Johnson.
Oh, well, speaking of the Hornets, like that connection there, Miles Bridges, a significant role when he comes back. I know I can see the expression on your face, Keith. What do you think?
I mean, I get it. Like, I don't know. I don't want to make peace with this being how this is going to go. I can't understand with the second set of allegations how this is even a thing. Like how like Steve Clifford and I'm not blaming Steve Clifford for this because this is an organizational decision, not a coach decision. But he said, he's been practicing. He looks good in practice. He looks like he's in great shape. And that's why he'll play a significant role. And this was after he kind of was like, I don't know if he's going to start or what it's going to look like. And to be clear why this is coming up, he can play Friday. So at the end of this week, he'll be eligible to play. He'll complete it was a 30-game suspension with 20 games credit time served. So 10 more this year after he missed all of last season as he went unsigned. You can't suspend a player who was unsigned. So, but the NBA kind of worked it out with the Hornets and with Bridges representation and all that. So I don't know. It feels like if we were at a point where the initial allegations had happened and we're a full year plus later, almost a year and a half later, and there is a belief of Miles Bridges did what he needed to do to become a better person and get things moving in the right direction, I would feel a completely different way about this. I would still say it still feels a little shaky to me, but I get it. But we had this second round of stuff that happened, and it just feels like that happened, and everybody collected was, oh, we're going to investigate it, but like we're really going to brush it under the rug, and maybe more is coming, and maybe more will pop up. I just don't feel good about this. Like nothing feels good about this. Strictly basketball wise, Charlotte can use him. They've had a lot of injuries, so we'll see what it looks like. Brendan Miller rolled an ankle on Sunday afternoon. It sounds like he's going to be day to day, but I don't know. That part seems so far secondary to the rest of this. I just, I quite honestly, after the second round allegations, I was a little surprised the Hornets didn't just waive him and say, take the money. We'll fight that out in arbitration if we need to, and just moved on. But here we are. Maybe something will come out that he wasn't involved or wasn't whatever
It's possible.
they said happened. I don't know, but right now, for everything we know, it seems a little off to be.
I mean, they
Here.
got to let the legal process play out
Sure.
and see what ultimately is doing. Because what, like, if they were to just waive him and then it comes out that the allegations are totally wrong, then that's a tough that's a tough situation to be in.
I
Right.
just
So
think then at that point you just chalk it up to there's just too much around him. Like it's better for him and us to go our separate
sure.
ways and start fresh. But yeah, I hear you. Like, and that's why it's funny because I have seen a lot of people suggest like the NBA has used kind of this administrative leave like gray area in the past. Like, why are we not just using that now? Like, let this play out. Like, let the legal process play out. No one's saying you're suspended. We're just go away until this is solved one way or another. But I don't know.
I mean, as long as if he's still getting his paycheck and all that, but I think the challenge is if you tell him just go away and he really wants to play basketball,
Sure.
like like let's say all of this comes, and again, I'm not saying this is the way it's going to go. It's certainly not the way it seems. But let's say all of this comes out and he's falsely accused, and it turns out all of this was incorrect. Then he kind of got punished for stuff that it turned out he didn't even do, but the punishment has already been levied. So that's the part that I'm always uneasy about with this stuff. But I agree, it's not good right now.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean,
We're
I hope
looking at what's
we
happening. I'm
don't
not
get to
saying that's the way
Friday.
this is going to go.
Yeah, I hope we don't get to Friday and it's like Miles Bridges return game for the Hornets and they're like all fire.
Right.
Like, just fine. If we're gonna do this, just let Steve Clifford play him and kind of we'll cover it like we do with any other basketball story. But even that just feels, I don't know, it just feels off. Like there's no better way that I can put it for myself than it just feels off to be at this point with him.
All right. Well, we've got that coming up. We've got a couple of stories left, but why don't we save those ones for tomorrow?
Sure.
That way we'll have plenty of time to get into them and everything like that.
Just so we end on a positive note.
Yeah, let's do that.
Tyrese Maxey,
oh my God,
50-point game,
50 points.
Did you hear what Joel Embiid? He said something along the lines of like, "I've had 50-point games, but I also shoot 20 free throws in them." So like it was kind of funny. And then he called Maxey the franchise, which was cool. And then all love to Tyrese Maxey too. He made the post game all about Kelly Oubre Jr. Like wouldn't even talk about himself. He's like, I just want to talk about my teammate who I only just met, but I already love the guy. Like, that was just so cool. But man, Tyrese Maxey,
he's been
Philly. Great. It was funny. So this was something Bobby Marks. They might be. Yeah. Bobby Marks put this out there. Tyrese Maxey might be the first player to not extend for and then get the second tier max, the designated player maximum, but earn it like in season. Nobody's done that yet. Guys have extended and had that qualifier and earned it that way, but nobody has not extended and then earned it and then signed for it. I mean, again, we're 10 games in. There have not been 6 guards in the league better than Tyrese Maxey this season. Like that, definitely not. So, long way to go yet. Long way to go. But Philly might be paying up quite a bit more than what they're expecting to. Off of that, doesn't impact their ability to use cap space or any of their plans there. But what it does is that's like $7 million more that's going on the tax bill towards the
Sure.
tax bill that you weren't expecting. And that's where that stuff gets very complicated all at once.
But I'll tell you this, like as we get into the numbers and all that kind of stuff, and as we should, and how much free space do they have and everything, Philly should be ecstatic to
Oh,
have to
100%.
pay him to not even, I shouldn't even say the word have to get to
Yeah.
pay him that, right? Because that means that he's playing so ridiculously well that he's earned that kind of money, and that's what he's doing. And it also, it again, I don't want to just forever link James Harden and Russell Westbrook because they're two very, very different players. But I think back to the Lakers where it was like Austin Reeves last year, and I know he's had his struggles this year, but the Austin Reeves last year, we kept seeing small sample sizes, but hey, he's pretty good. What if they just gave him the ball more?
Yep.
And then they trade away Russell Westbrook, and that put the ball more into the hands of Austin Reeves, and off they went, and he blew up. I'm kind of seeing a similar thing here with James Harden to an even greater degree. I mean, Austin Reeves is never dropping 50 points, right? Tyrese Maxey seems to be unleashed by removing James Harden from this team. So in a weird roundabout way, the 76ers may end up a net positive by trading away James Harden and not even getting necessarily a great return for him. This seems to have opened things up completely for Tyrese Maxey to become far better than this version of James Harden was ever going to be.
Yeah, this is now a textbook example of addition by subtraction.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's, now all of a sudden he gets to blow up. You have a little bit better balance in your lineups. He's still not a great defender. He's just kind of small and he doesn't do that. But now now you have Melton, who is a pretty solid defender in the backcourt with him. And yeah, after a bunch of negative stories, let's end on a positive with what a cool thing. I mean, 50 points, but 20 of 32 shooting. And if anything, probably should have shot more. Like he probably should have taken more shots. I can tell you my attitude. If I was in the NBA and I was 20 of 32, I would not have finished that way. I would be more likely to finish 20 of 50 than I would have 20 of 32.
Like, I'm on a heater. Move out of my way.
That's it. I would have been like, get out of the way. These shots are going up.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, the 76ers have been better than expected because Maxey's been, in part because Maxey's been so good. Yeah. So we'll see.
And Joel Embiid's still pretty good too.
Yeah, he's not bad.
He had a monster game last night that's like completely lost now to history because of this. It was funny. Just last thing on this, somebody had said, I think it was Josh Eberly on Twitter, had suggested last night. He's like, could this be the first game where we see two teammates get 50 each? Because they were both trending that way at one point in the game, and no two teammates have ever done that. And it prompted me to look up just to make sure I had this right. Did you know the game where Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points? The other four starters all scored in double figures too.
No, really?
And the sixth man scored 9 points in that game. The other team, who was the New York Knicks, had 3 guys score over 30 points in that game. And where Chamberlain scored the 100. So just I knew I was pretty certain the other 4 starters had all scored in double figures because I've looked at that box score a million times in my life to try to understand it. But yeah, so just little fun aside there on high scoring games. Do you know what the highest outside of Chamberlain, obviously, and outside of like crazy closest 2 teammates have ever gotten? Do you know?
I'm guessing. I'm gonna say like Jordan and Pippen did it at some point. And they hit like 90 or something.
Oh,
that's just that's a shot in the dark.
Yeah, hold on. I want to make sure I get it right. It's Kiki Vandeweghe, and it was a game where the Nuggets played the Pistons.
And you're saying 2 guys score 50, not 2 guys combined for 100, right?
Correct. Yeah, two guys over 50. It was let me find this. There it is. Here's the box score. All right. Kiki Vandeweghe scored 51 points, and Alex English scored 47 points. As the Detroit Pistons beat the Denver Nuggets 186 to 184. It was the highest scoring game in NBA history. It was triple overtime.
I was gonna say that had to be multiple overtimes there.
Yeah, triple overtime. But yeah, Vandeweghe 51 and English 47. In that same game. In that game, Isaiah Thomas had 47 and 17 in that game. So he was the big scorer for the Detroit Pistons that night. But yeah, 186 to 184 in that game. So
Wow.
crazy, right? Yeah, 51 and 47, Kiki Van de Wey and Alex English. Alex English always a underrated scorer. He's a good one when you're doing like those what are they, immaculate grid type things and stuff. If there's a nugget and scoring, he's always a good one to play in that
I
one.
like it. Good one. Yeah. Good. Some positivity to close out the day. Positivity to close out the day. I like it.
And a little history.
I always appreciate it. But all right, we'll wrap things up there. Want to thank everybody again for joining us. Make sure that you do subscribe to the YouTube channel as well as the podcast feed. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.